Alright guys, so I've left this to harden for a couple of days now, and it's looking pretty nice, but not perfect. We can get a little more depth out of this finish. It's got an interesting tone to it, so I'd like to see it on there a little thicker, and we can get it a little smoother than this too without actually having to sand and polish it right off the bat. So what I'm going to do now that those two initial heavier coats have had time to dry and harden, is I'm going to take a piece of 800 grit sandpaper. Some people like to go with more of a 320 or 400 grit. I prefer to go with the higher grits to get it as smooth as possible. I think that the tung oil won't have any trouble adhering to that. So I'm just going to take my 800 grit. The sides, the edges look fairly smooth, all the routing and stuff. So I'm just going to worry about the top now. And I'm just going to sand along here lightly, just to scuff up the surface so that I can coat it again, basically. Now, this paper has a foam backing on it. That's not really necessary, but I find that it helps. And whenever possible, on a flat surface, I prefer to use a sanding block so I don't have to worry about my hands leaving uneven amounts of sanding, uneven grooves and stuff like that in the surface. So if I'm working on a flat surface, I like to sand with something flat. So I'm just going to gently go over this a couple times and get it scuffed down so that it will accept the next coat. Doesn't have to be completely perfect, but the closer to perfect it is, the easier it's going to be for you to work on later. Now this will, when you sand it, it will kind of look like it's lightening it up a bit. Don't worry about that. That's natural. That happens anytime you sand a finish. And that will go away when we apply our next coat. So don't let yourself be troubled by the appearance of it lightening. As soon as we get that next coat on there, that will disappear immediately. Alright, so that should about do it. Doesn't take much. I think we're ready to go with the next coat. So let me put this sandpaper away so I don't lose it. So this time, rather than using a foam brush, we're going to use a rag to apply our tung oil. Make sure that your rag is free of lint and it's clean. So something like an old beaten up t-shirt that you've cut up is usually fairly good because all the lint has been washed out of it. Your dryer has it. Anyway, so that's what we're going to do. We're just going to take a cloth, and this time we're going to apply considerably lighter coat than before. Doesn't take a whole lot to do this one. And we're just going to rub it on this time. Okay, so just rub on a nice light coat. Try and get it as even as you can. I like to apply it in only one direction, no swirls or anything like that. Makes it look more even that way. I just about said even there. That would have been kind of ridiculous. Now a lot of people prefer to pour their oil into a little container and use that to dip the rag in and apply the finish that way. There's nothing wrong with that. I just don't feel like cleaning a container. And that's why I'm not doing it. I find that this works just as well. Otherwise I would be using the container. So on a surface this small, this is a very short process. Because we're putting it on so much later, we don't have to worry so much about bubbles and stuff like that. So obviously I'm not using a brush, so I can't brush out bubbles, but I don't have to worry about, I guess, rubbing out bubbles to that great an extent either, because they don't really show up in this. So that's about it for that coat. Looks pretty good. And I'm going to give that a couple hours to dry, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing once more. One more light coat over that. I'm not going to bother showing you that because it's a direct repetition of what I've just done. And that'll be about it. Once that's hardened, we should be finished. So I'll show you the finished product. And as always, when you're using a container like this of oil, make sure that you squeeze the container down. Probably with a C-clamp would be the easiest way, so that you don't worry about trying to squeeze it with your hand and having it splash all over the place. So squeeze the container down so that you get all the air out of there and the fluid rises to the top, and then close it up. So I'll see you guys when this is finished drying, or when the second coat is finished drying rather. Alright guys, so that's our tung oil finish completed on this piece. As you can see, it's got a nice gloss to it. It's got beautiful depth now that we've done the tung oil finish on top of the Danish oil. But even just by itself, the tung oil finish gives a really nice depth to it and a nice light brown color, like kind of like you poured honey over top of your piece. So we did 4 coats in total, 2 heavier ones at the beginning, and a sanding in the middle, and then 2 lighter ones. And that's about it. You could continue with this process if you wanted. You could sand this down with something like 1000 grit or 1500 grit now, nice and light, and then go over it again with a light rub-on coat of this, maybe 2, and you might be able to achieve an even smoother, glossier finish. But I'm pretty happy with this, with how this turned out for the moment. So as it stands, I'm just going to leave it like this. Hope that this was helpful for anybody looking to finish something in tung oil, whether it's a lid to a box, a chair, a guitar, whatever it happens to be. And as always, thanks for watching. See you next time.